In every conversation, the words we choose can either bridge understanding or widen the gap between conflicting perspectives. One word in particular, you, often becomes the catalyst for defensiveness, even when its intent might not be to harm. Unintentionally, the use of you can transform a dialogue into a battleground, where people feel targeted rather than heard. When we use the second-person pronoun, we direct responsibility squarely at our conversational partner. In disagreements, phrases like "you never listen" or "you always do this" force the listener to assume the role of the problem, rather than fostering collaborative problem-solving. This accusatory approach signals to the other person that they are being blamed, creating an immediate defensive reaction. Rather than exploring mutual responsibility, the focus shifts solely onto you, an isolated target of criticism that can shut down open, reflective conversation. This defensive stance is not just a fleeting emotional reaction. Research in communication dynamics and psychology shows that a focus on you can escalate conflicts. When one party feels unfairly singled out, their natural response is to protect their self-identity, often by counterattacking or withdrawing. This reaction quickly spirals into a cycle of blame and defensiveness, where every statement becomes a trigger. Instead of allowing room for vulnerability and mutual understanding, the dialogue transforms into a verbal tug-of-war, a cycle that rarely leads to resolution or growth. An alternative approach is to recalibrate our language from you to I. When we express our feelings and experiences using I statements, we take ownership of our emotions and invite empathy rather than conflict. For instance, saying "I feel unheard" when interruptions occur centers the discussion on your experience rather than accusing a partner of intentional wrongdoing. This subtle shift in language nudges the conversation from blame to sharing, opening up space for negotiation and mutual respect. It transforms the conversation into a constructive dialogue where both parties can feel validated and understood. Consciously reducing the use of you in conversations, especially heated ones, requires reflection and practice. The underlying issue is that the pronoun you creates an environment of isolation and confrontation. By focusing instead on shared experiences and mutual feelings, we acknowledge that conflict is seldom one-sided. Our words are more than mere vehicles for information. They shape our perceptions, influence our emotional responses, and dictate the quality of our interactions. Linguistic choices can provoke ingrained patterns of thought, such as defensiveness and blame, which are hard to dismantle in moments of tension. Reflecting on how the simple act of saying you might inadvertently spark a defensive response reminds us that communication is an art, a balance between honesty and sensitivity. By carefully choosing our words, we not only express our truth, but also honor the inherent dignity of our conversation partners. Research on interpersonal communication, especially that stemming from Albert Mehrabian's work, often cites the statistic that when conveying feelings or attitudes, only about 7% of the message is delivered through the actual words, verbal language, while 38% comes from tone of voice and 55% from body language and facial expressions. This breakdown is commonly known as the 7/30-8-55% rule, and is frequently quoted to illustrate that nonverbal components dominate in face-to-face communications about emotions and attitudes. The title, "You, the Problem," is a reminder that when we focus solely on the other person through our use of language, we risk shutting down constructive dialogue. By shifting from accusatory you statements to more inclusive I statements, we embrace a style of communication that fosters empathy, shared responsibility, and ultimately, connection. In every interaction, mindful language can bridge differences rather than deepen divides, joining hearts and minds in the quest for genuine understanding. Stepping back from habitual language patterns and engaging more thoughtfully may not resolve every disagreement immediately, but it opens the door to deeper, more respectful conversations. So next time you find yourself in the heat of a discussion, consider, is it really you that's the problem? Or is it the way we speak about each other that prevents us from truly hearing one another?